the startup life is really difficult. It's a lot of pressure. It's not for everyone. Some people really can thrive on that uncertainty and other people really do not like it. Asked for money pretty quickly when we launched to see, is this good enough? Started off charging £12 a month or something, bringing in that amount of annual revenue, just coming into the bank. It's really nice to see your bank account being a bit fuller than just waiting for a monthly subscription. Or since university, I've probably been much more interested in self-development, and I probably, at university, I was starting to really read like psychology books and that kind of stuff, and just figuring your own stuff out. I think I had to learn I can't just be one of the guys, and realizing there's an impact that I have when I walk in the room. People worry that you can fire them. People want your approval. You just have to acknowledge that is a thing and it exists in the relationship, and therefore you're never just going to be one of the team. Somebody gave me the advice once, which was your job as a CEO is to be able to do nothing. And so I've been kind of working on that.
If you have been enjoying listening to the stories of entrepreneurs across Edinburgh, then why not subscribe? If you're on YouTube, you can hit the red button down below and hit the bell to get notifications. Or if you're listening on Spotify or Apple, then subscribe to the podcast. We hope you enjoy the show.
Colin, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, great to be here.
Great to have you. So just give us a bit of context. Tell us about Float.
So Float was an idea that I had when I was running my previous business, which was a digital agency. It was basically around the fact that I was running everything in a spreadsheet, all our finances, our VAT, taxes, all that kind of stuff. And we moved to online accounting software, but I felt frustrated that it was not giving me the full picture of what's going to happen in the next 3 to 6 months. So we just had this idea, what if we could take all the information from the accounting software and almost feed it into our spreadsheet, and then that became an idea for an app. And really, our kind of goal now is actually we've gone back to helping agencies with their cash flow forecast and their pipeline prediction.
Yeah. And so tell us, just in terms of team, what does that look like? You've got offices in Edinburgh?
Yeah, so we're actually smaller than many people think. We're 14 people at the moment, probably 10 in Scotland, 10 to 12 in Scotland, and a couple of people just knocking around further afield.
Yeah, amazing. So let's go back to the beginning then. Talk us through maybe a little bit about the agency, what that looked like, and then that journey into Float.
Yeah, so agency was really scrappy. I came out of university in Heriot Watt, did computer science, wanted to start a business. It was just the kind of beginning of the internet. A lot of websites looked pretty rubbish at the time, so felt like we could do a better job, and find somebody who was a great artist and designer, actually worked to sort of help her learn Photoshop and skills that she needed. And then the two of us, she would design and I would build websites. And that's a long story of how that all got started. But eventually we kind of scrapped together, got some clients and built a business out of that did for 10 years and sold. Oh, wow. And then that kind of... at some point in that, I'd had the idea for Float and wanted to go full time at it and not run it as a side project. So it was really, once I knew that, it was full steam ahead into getting Float off the ground and building a new team and all that kind of stuff, and going back into that startup mode.
Yeah, I was intrigued when I saw kind of your history that, brand and marketing, quite creative, and then you go into cash flow forecasting and you think it seems that the polar opposite in the detail.
So yeah, well, interestingly, what I had read one of the sort of formative books for me was a book called The E-Myth by Michael Gerber, and he talks about systemizing your business. So I was thinking about that. I took most of the time I took Fridays out to work on my business, and I remember thinking finances, that's a big problem. I'm still the one who has to chase the invoices. I've got the spreadsheet that only I can understand. How could I kind of systemize that so if I wanted to step away, somebody else could take it on? And so just started writing down all the processes around the financial stuff. It wasn't that I was particularly interested in the finances. It was more I was interested in the efficiency of just how does it work, and realized that there's all these many processes that were all stuck in my head. So how could I get them on paper? So just we started with finances and almost got stuck on that. And, I started looking at the spreadsheet, We'd also been starting to build applications, like moving from building sort of static to websites to content managed websites to then building applications for people. So we were, my background was software. So I actually a lot of people came to us with ideas for apps that they just didn't have the budget to build, like it can take, everybody can get the first version of an app out, but that's only the starting point. And we were really trying to tell people, we can build you an app, but are you going to have the budget and the resources to really go through all the iterations and, take another 2 or 3 years to get it where it needs to be? And most people didn't. So I always wanted to do our own app. And I went out to San Francisco actually to a Y Combinator event. And I was just sitting in the audience and talking to people like Jason Fried from Basecamp, and Mark Zuckerberg was on the stage, and it was really, the parties were at Airbnb and Dropbox, and it was very inspirational just to be out in San Francisco and Silicon Valley at that time, and just thought, yeah, I've got to do this. I want to launch an app. I want to do my own startup and move away from the agency. Sort of what I thought at the time was the sort of sense of constantly having to pitch for new work, move into more of a subscription model. The funny thing was then realizing, like, as soon as we launched the startup, we were probably going to have to pitch more to investors because, obviously, we tried to we bootstrapped it a bit, but at the end of the day, if you really want to grow, you've got to raise some money often. So that was another part of it.
And how did, in that early stage then, when you moved away from, it was If Looks Could Kill, that's right, into Float, you sold If Looks Could Kill? But actually, just getting the thing off the ground and financing it, how did that work? Because it takes...
Yeah, and a lot of people, I've spoken to a lot of people about starting their own company, and that's often the bit that moving away from that regular income as a salary to the uncertainty, and you really have to embrace that. And so thankfully, Phil, my co-founder at the time, he sort of started just going down one day. I think he dropped to 1 day with us, and then 2 days with us, and then eventually went full time. So he was able to sort of support himself in that for a year. I had the money from selling the company that I was able to rely on sort of for my first year, and it wasn't huge, but it was enough to kind of get me through. So we had that kind of foundation, which was great. We also at the time were there's a project called TechCube was starting, which ultimately became Codebase. Mm-hmm. So we were in that kind of community of entrepreneurs. So office space was really cheap, and it was just 2 of us. And eventually we started getting some money from customers. So we actually took our first customer. I think we had about 300 or 400 customers, or people who were trialing the project while it was in beta. And we said, look, we're going to do a lifetime plan. For 100 people, I think it was £300 for life. So we knew we were going to raise 30,000.
Yeah.
And that was kind of our first seed money that we brought in through that. So we bootstrapped it initially. I think we got some money from the university as well, like 5,000, which felt like a lot at the time, and was kind of like helped us get just a little bit of money going through the system and a website up and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, we really took very little out of the business. We didn't draw very much as a salary until we started needing to. And by that point, we'd sort of got some early subscriptions, and the monthly recurring revenue was enough to pay us, which was brilliant. So it was all going pretty nicely up at that point.
All right. Up until that point. All right. Okay. There's a cliffhanger.
The big sort of moment, early challenging point came when Phil, my co-founder, we decided that it wasn't really what he wanted to do. And the startup life is really difficult. It's a lot of pressure. And it's not for everyone. I think if you're, some people really can thrive on that uncertainty, and other people really do not like it. I was listening to something yesterday which said, some people, if they're given the choice, would you like to take an electric shock or open the box and find out, there may be something better or maybe something worse? A lot of people will take the shock just because they know what they're going to get. I'm the sort of person who will always open the box. You know, I want to know if there's an upside. I'll go for the upside. So, yeah. So Phil decided that it wasn't for him, and he could probably be making a lot more money. You know, earning. You know, working in a sort of larger company, and actually has done it great. And we're still friends. But I remember really clearly that moment where I was thinking, you know, the whole doing a startup, you need a technical co-founder really to be able to get it off the ground. It's really hard to succeed if you're not writing the code, or you've got somebody, you know, who's like a founder who's writing the code, because you need that level of buy-in. So I just thought, you know, it's over. And after taking a bit of time, just realized, hold on a minute, we've got this foundation. I'm in a really strong position. If we can find somebody who can come in and sort of help us get this, you know, to the next stage, then we've got a chance. And like, let's take a chance and open the box and see what we get. So it was that was the sort of next phase where we brought in some, you know, guys that were more inexperienced, but actually really passionate about what they were doing. And, you know, we managed to get to the next stage. It's all about getting to the next stage, and we managed to get to the next stage and raise some money through angel investment, and eventually then hire at the level we needed. You know, bringing in pretty experienced software engineer to come and sort of do the next chapter.
Yeah, I have a friend who describes it like in the fund raising money world as it's like there's a truck coming down a single track road, and you're a car, and you need to get to that passing place before the truck hits you, and that's like the constant game, right? It's like you get the money and the truck goes further back, and if you can get to a passing place, it's like, okay, right, well, we can sit here for a few months, we can break even, or you know, we can, and then it's like, okay, here we go again. It's like you pull back out and you're kind of racing for that next passing place.
Yeah, it's pretty full on.
Yeah. So in terms of like the step to, obviously I'm intrigued about the agency side, but like the step from agency into that, like was there one main thing out of that where you were like, wow, that was like a huge, you know, a big fail that I learned in agency world that saved me a year or 2 years worth of time in the startup?
Yeah, really good question. I think we'd been quite good in the agency world of building working on our culture and working on our team. So that was a good starting point for me. You know, we're going to eat lunch together. We're going to build that kind of connection with people. You know, we knew obviously how to make it look good and how to kind of get that early interaction with customers. And you know, there was a lot of stuff happening with Y Combinator and this kind of lean startup approach, which just coming in at the time we were starting, which was great. So get out of the building and talk to your customers. So we had all that. We'd learned all that. And we'd learned about seeing people launching apps that we'd built for them and realizing like they failed because they didn't have the budget to come back and edit. So, you know, we knew that we were going to have to iterate fast. And it was never the end goal wasn't to try and wait and launch something. So we've been through that process. I think the other thing we learned is like subscription is really important, and not to wait too long for asking for money. So we basically asked for money pretty quickly when we launched to see is this good enough. So that was important to us, and I think again we knew we had to get the revenue coming in, or rather than sort of wait until we felt it was perfect and then launch. So that was a good lesson as well.
Yeah. Out of interest, you mentioned the lifetime plan that kind of got you that initial 30 grand. Is that something that's common within the kind of the app space, or?
I've seen it. I mean, it's kind of it kind of got adopted by a company called AppSumo. Have you heard of those guys? Yeah. Where they'll do, you know, like a lifetime offer, really low price, and it gets you a lot of customers. And I don't know if I would recommend it actually, you know, at that level, because, you know, we knew we wanted to limit it to 100. And we just kind of had it as an idea, you know, like will people kind of back us almost? And so, yeah, I hadn't come across it hugely, but I do recommend it, you know, when you're starting out, like just keep it to 100, you know, and pick a price and see, you know, some people, we might even have some customers that are still with us that, you know, have, you know, saved a lot of money because they went for it. So it's a good balance. And if it's about, you know, 2 years worth of subscription, what you would charge for an annual, maybe 2.5 years worth, then for somebody, you know, going, well, I think these guys are onto something, I might use this for more than 3 years. So let's just go for it and take the risk. And so we don't have many of those, like a lot of those customers have moved on or, but ultimately, some of them have done very well out of it.
Yeah. Well, and it helps you in those early stages as well.
Yeah. So helpful to get that cash in up front. And, when we were charging, maybe started off charging £12 a month or something, maybe. That bringing in that amount of annual revenue, just coming into the bank, it's really nice to see your bank account being a bit fuller than just waiting for a monthly subscription.
It'd be fun to know if any of them are still on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If we just send them something. But hey, we just noticed you're still here. Thanks so much.
But and I suppose that's the other thing as well, having that monthly recurring revenue as opposed to the agency model, which was maybe less recurring.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And that was probably for me, I think I just got to the point where, I realized we could have been doing, if we'd known this earlier, a lot of what we did was websites. We could have put in retainers in place sooner. Because a lot of times people do want to come back and just fix something. We didn't get on that model quick enough. So by the time we realized that our retainer revenue was still too small, whereas I think if you've been building it up over a number of years, then it can just keep your business cash flow running, and it's really nice. But having to keep going out and pitch for new work. And again, the biggest lesson that I had to learn over the last 20 years is marketing. I always thought the product will sell itself. In the agency, we did no marketing. And it's funny being on the other side now and just realizing like how naive that was in a way, because, I thought, people will come to If Looks Could Kill because they hear about us from somewhere or they get referral or, and that does work. But actually somebody asked me a year after I left, say, hey, who would you recommend for web design in Edinburgh? And I was just like, let me Google that for you, and thought, oh, of course, how many people customers were Googling that very search term. We weren't even bidding on it because we thought the leads would be low quality or something. And actually sometimes you just have to be there and you have to try and change up, at the time. And maybe there's different things you would do now, but certainly you've got to be testing and experimenting with your marketing and acquisition to see if you can acquire customers at a certain, even, spending £1,000 on an ad that you're going to generate 10,000 if the customer converts. It's worth it, right? So you can spend quite a bit of cash, but it's quite a bold move and it's scary. But that's the game we're in now. Is we've got to learn how to acquire customers. How do people find us, and how do we position ourselves in that?
Yeah, it's interesting because when I launched Umore, we're 80% retainer based. Like all our content is retainer, and that again, it was the same. I came from the events industry where it felt like every time I was just like, we were spending a fortune on Facebook and Google trying to get and our recurring was poor from there. So it meant that we were spending a fortune on the customer to get them in. And so when I started this business, I'm like, nope. Recurring, that's what we're doing. That's our model, and that's what we'll stick to. So not to dismiss the 20% that makes up, that's definitely the icing on the cake. But yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah, we were probably the reverse, maybe 10% retainer and 90% project, which is why cash flow became such a worry.
Yeah, we're just seeing that.
Yeah. And of course, investors love it, right? As a model.
Investors love it. Do you mean from a
monthly recurring and subscription?
Yeah. I mean, that is the way, and I guess the thing is that we've learned, it's not just recurring. It's like how are you expanding that as well? So for a long time, our prices were flat, so we had no expansion revenue, and again, customers getting more value as we're adding more and more features. Some people there's lots of software we pay for where we'd be happy to pay more based on the value that we're getting. Talk about accounting software being something like £20 a month. It just feels like, it's the platform of our whole, tech stack. So we happily pay £200 a month for it. So they're leaving money on the table there, and you don't want to be in that position.
So give me an example of what expansion revenue would be then?
So we've actually just launched this in the last month.
Right.
New plans where we've now moved into a project forecasting model. So a lot of businesses like ours, like the agency, would have had a pipeline where you're pitching for events. So just, you want to try and find a fair usage policy where it's like if you use the product more, you're getting more value out of it. Then you pay a bit more for it, and people are generally happy with that. It doesn't feel like a tax. So now we are charging it's a couple of pounds per project. So if you're at 20 projects a month, you'll pay a bit more than you would if you're 5 projects a month. And again, as we get larger companies on that, then they're expanding with us, and there's also, we changed the plan structure as well, so there's more functionality available. You can do longer forecasting. You can have more users on the product, that kind of thing. So it's just about thinking where a lot of companies, they're happy to pay, they're getting the value. Don't leave the money on the table.
So as you've continued to grow, then there's been leadership teams and starting to build that out. Talk us through that process. What was that like?
Yeah, again, in the agency we were quite flat. It was a smallish team, so we never really needed that. I think I realized that at some point we were hiring people, and I was expecting them to think like a founder or thinking like me, read my mind, and realized like, oh, this is not happening the way I would have imagined it. So how do we get the team on the same page? And once you kind of grow from a 5-person team to a 12-person team, all of a sudden, you've got to start thinking about that. And so another book we kind of read, which was called Get a Grip by a guy called Gino Wickman, talks about the EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System, and that really helped us again, just to kind of sit down with our team, work out what are our main objectives, what are we trying to achieve, and like how we're reporting on those, and are we doing what we said we would do. So yeah, early stage team was probably a little bit dysfunctional, just based on me not really realizing I'm explicit about my values and what I want to do with the company, and just expecting people to know that, and hoping they get on the same page, to being clear about what we need to be doing and that. So yeah, I think it's a real growth. You have to grow as a leader in that, and the only way to do it is to go through it and experience it and struggle with it, and then figure out what you need to do better. And so I find, like, I've had some coaching. I find that really helpful, and yeah, having a system in place and working with different organizations that can really help us with that. So yeah, we brought in a group called the Table Group, which is a guy called Patrick Lencioni. He writes a lot of books, like 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Yeah. So we worked with them and did some offsites, and again, just really like practicing, like, can we get people to be vulnerable? Can we get like people to be real? And yeah, it's funny, like, people come in from the business world, and that is not what they're used to. They are used to keeping their cards close to their chest, defending their own territory, putting their priorities ahead of the whole company priority. And the Table Group's model is like the leadership team is the first team. It's the team that you're on. You've got to have each other's backs. You've got to be pulling for the same goal. It's not like, well, engineering want this resource and marketing want this resource, sales want this. It's actually, how can you talk together and want the same thing? And so, yeah, all that I've had to learn, and it's been some painful lessons, but like I've loved learning it. Yeah.
On the kind of the word of learning as well, have you been a learner all your life? Because again, the reason I asked the question is that from a personal point of view, I always enjoyed learning, but it wasn't probably until I really so I always read certain types of books. But when I got into coaching, I really started to accelerate my own personal learning. And I just wondered, you've mentioned 2 kind of very well-known books, The E-Myth and obviously Get a Grip with Gino Wickman. And it's like, did you go and search those? Did someone put them in your hands?
Yeah, I think I've always, basically since school or since university, I'd probably been much more interested in self-development, and I probably, you know, at university I was starting to really read like psychology books and that kind of stuff, and just figuring your own stuff out, and yeah, it took me a while before I got into coaching. Like I was quite reluctant to get into that. I didn't think I needed that. But actually, Gareth Williams invested in Float, and part of his investment was he said, "I'll give you a coach that you can work with who's coached me." So that was my starting point to getting some coaching, and that was great. Yeah, I think I've realized like I've got to up my game here. If this business is gonna work, I don't want to be the bottleneck. I don't want to be the guy that I've seen companies where people are scared of the boss, or they're, you know, you feel everybody's like talking about the boss as the kind of person that they don't, you know, like they're sort of like a big baby. Yeah. It's like, I don't want to be that guy, but I also don't want to be so like needing approval from my team that I can make difficult decisions and challenge them. So it's I think I had to learn, I can't just be one of the guys, you know, I can't be I just wanted to be, but I'm just like everybody else, and realizing like, no, there's an impact that I have when I walk in the room. People worry that you can fire them. People want your approval. You just have to like acknowledge that is a thing and it exists in the relationship, and therefore you're never just going to be one of the team. You know, I think you see that in programs like The Office. You know, it's like really kind of satires, but it's very true that people just will never look at you as just one of the team. You know, and you've got to lead in that way. So a lot of learning and a lot of having to up my game.
So in the process of building, then, you know, there's this kind of like tear between what to be out on the shop, you know, out on the shop floor with the guys, and then being in the office and having to be the guy that's making the tough decisions. And in terms of then like the systems to kind of take yourself out of those places, talk us through kind of the system building. Like, at what points did you realize like, okay, we need to really start, you know, upping our game in terms of like internal systems to allow this business to run?
Yeah, I mean, that's been a constant. That's probably been a constant for us ever since we decided to hire a senior leadership team. Because you sort of get to the point where you're realizing something's not working, and why is it not working, and let's try this or let's try that. And so, yeah, I think it's crises tend to kind of create those opportunities, don't they? Where you realize like something has to change. One of the big ones we did was I think it was 2021, we did this program called Startup Core Strengths with a guy called Matt Lerner. And that was like a cohort of our team. And we'd done some stuff like this before, but it was like, I'd just been on it myself. And this was really the first time we brought like a sort of 6-person team in to see, like, we want to be able to try stuff, and really realizing that, you know, startup is about experimentation. And like, we are not experimenting fast enough. We're taking too long. We're thinking there's something called the next feature fallacy in startup land, where you believe that if we just get this next feature in, then the floodgates will open and everything will change. And it's just like, it just doesn't work. You're actually making your product more complicated. So how do we actually take experimentation, not just in the product, but into marketing as well? And we weren't doing that at that. And Startup Core Strengths is all, you know, what are the biggest risks in your business model? What are the things that you need to try and prove, and how quickly can you prove them? So can you prove it in a week? Could you prove it in 2 weeks? You know, rather than thinking like, oh, well, let's try a new website and it's going to take us 2 or 3 months before we actually launch it, and then we're not sure if it really makes a difference or not. You know, like, a lot of businesses have been in that position, and so we're like, well, what would be so can we have like almost an experiment backlog of, you know, this is an experiment we're going to try. We're going to totally rip up the homepage. We're going to just change it into this. We're going to change this wording, and we're going to leave it up for a week and see if it materially makes any difference. And if it doesn't, then forget it. You know, if it does, then let's go. So we just tried one recently where we've put a new landing page up. We've done some work on with another coach, and it's basically performing 3 times better than our existing landing page. So that, that probably took 2 or 3 weeks of work to think about copy, think about design, value proposition. But it's that kind of pace that we really wanted to encourage. So that's probably been the biggest thing. I think Startup Core Strengths kind of kickstarted that for us. And getting the data in place in the product to also see like how many people come in to the product. There's a drop off at every stage in the funnel, like people who land on your website, who sign up for the trial, who then connect their accounting software, who then do the next thing. And you can see these drop offs, and it's all about trying to optimize that funnel. And ask questions as to like, well, what if we change this? What if we change that? And it's annoying that it's taken us so long to really realize that, because I was always under the impression like if we just added this other thing, if we just did this a little bit better, then, and those things could take 3 months or 4 months or 5 months. And meanwhile, you're just waiting and hoping, and it's frustrating. So, and as you get bigger and there's more engineers, things take longer and you start working on multiple things together. So you've got maybe 3 or 4 things in the oven that you're hoping to launch, but it's not fast enough. So we've really had to learn that in the last sort of 18 months and come back to that experiment fast method.
And you mentioned when we spoke just earlier about outsourcing. What's your kind of view on that? Why has that been a thing for you?
Well, I think for us, outsourcing is something that we want to keep as much knowledge in-house as we can, but I think where we outsource is bringing in is experts. So we're not outsourcing generally stuff that we don't want to do ourselves. We're outsourcing like for experience. So let's bring in a marketing expert and sit down with them and actually get them to get us into the mindset that we need to get to from experimentation. So most of our outsourcing, I mean, obviously we would outsource things that we don't need to be specialists in. So our specialism is writing software. So therefore we don't want our software engineers to be working on our website, our marketing website, because it's not something that, somebody else can do that. And so it's really about figuring out where let's bring in somebody who's quite comfortable building web, doesn't need any extra knowledge, and like our engineers work on the stuff that only they know. And so it's about efficiency. Somebody might be a Google AdWords expert, but so we don't need to be doing the technical stuff on that, but actually we just need to be giving the direction and the thinking behind it. That's where the real value is that you're wanting people to sort of work towards. So we're trying to just ultimately, bite the bullet and spend the money when we need to.
Yeah. The way I'm hearing what you're saying there is a phrase that can always kick around my head, which is only do what only you can do. You've probably heard that before, and that's how I'm hearing it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really interesting when you apply it as like to the CEO position. Somebody gave me the advice once, which was your job as a CEO is to be able to do nothing. And so I've been kind of working on that where, like ultimately there should be main stuff for me to do is to make sure that we've got cash in the bank, that the strategy and the vision are clear, and then to go and build those big relationships that need to be built, whether it's with investors or, people that can help us get our message out. So all the other stuff that I'm doing, if I'm getting involved in product or marketing, it's not really where I want to be spending my time. So I've been trying to get, and I'm then encouraging the rest of the team to think like that as well. So they kind of get into that mindset of, should I be doing this or should somebody else be doing this?
Shifting over to now the marketing focus, who would you say is your customer that you're trying to speak to then? Yeah,
and it's funny, we if you'd asked me this like 5 years ago, I would have pulled my hair out, because we always struggled with this question, because we launched Float. When we launched Float for the Xero platform, we started with a platform called Free Agent. When we launched it on top of Xero, we just had all this influx of businesses, and it was so diverse that we had architects, we had e-commerce companies, we had drinks companies, we had construction, all these types of different services that all wanted something slightly different. And we just thought, well, our target is small business owners, and accountants and bookkeepers and virtual CFOs and all that sort of stuff. And it was just, I wish that somebody had said to me, that's far too broad, it's not going to work. we ultimately learned that lesson the hard way. And now we looked at our customer base. We looked at who our best customers were. We found like 3 key groups of people. One of those was agencies, which is funny because that was my background. And I just thought, well, that's one we can start with, and let's go out and talk to those guys and find out what they like about it. And so, yeah, we're focusing on agencies right now because we understand them. There's a sort of sense of I've been there in the past, and the software works for them. So, yeah, that's what we're focusing on. And it's tough because you can feel like, you're turning away business that might be able to use your product. And they still can, but ultimately that's not where we're focusing on. So our marketing is going to look different. Our product's going to feel different for those businesses.
And this idea of niching down into kind of specific sectors as well that you're addressing, this is the stuff that you read in a book that you think, gosh, if I'd read that or known that X number of years ago, I could have cut out all the stuff. But the reality is, do you think you had to go through what you've gone through to get to that realization? Yeah. Or did you just miss that lesson, years ago? Do you know?
Yeah, I think so many of these lessons you kind of have to go through. Like it's really same with hiring people, isn't it? Where you think, oh, I wish I should have known that wasn't the right hire for us. But until you've gone through that, it's really difficult. I think with the lesson of niching, I would have thought we are niching. We're small businesses. We're not enterprise. So that's a niche, but you realize that it's not niche enough. Yeah. Somebody actually said to us, it's so like if I'd asked you how many lightning strikes that destroyed property were there in the world in the last year, how many do you think there were? And I was maybe like 10. And the answer's something like 200,000. It's crazy. So it's easy because I've never seen one. You just assume that actually that's the.
I just said 10. I was thinking 10.
It's a crazy number because you've never seen it, so you have this bias that it doesn't exist. And I think it's the same with niching. There's a group of people out there, and you think there can't be that many people that are specifically just into this, but it turns out there often are, and it's worth trying to find them because they know about each other and they're talking to each other. And actually, you think about how companies like Facebook and Airbnb grew. It's actually like you start small. You start with a group of people that are that are talking to each other, but it's very, very targeted. And so we've ultimately come to believe that that is true, and I don't see very many exceptions to that. So really, we've just got to that point where our whole strategy is around a targeted group of people that talk to each other, that act the same way, that have the same problems, and everything else comes from kind of getting to that tipping point where you become the default solution for those people because they're just like, of course, rather than trying to start a new, like a Zoom competitor, actually find a group of people that are struggling with one aspect of Zoom, like musicians can't do band practice because the latency isn't good enough on the sound, and solve a problem for them. And then all of a sudden you've got all these bands using products. So it's that kind of mentality of just don't try and replace the whole thing, become something great for a small group of people.
Very good.
And so as you've kind of grown this team, you mentioned earlier a little bit about values and sort of like that clash as you tried to bring that. How have you managed to kind of implement values and encourage the team to really kind of buy into that, or have them buy in the process? Yeah,
values has been one that I again was really reluctant to get into because I just thought, I don't want some corporate nonsense. But then really got into the point where it's like, if we're hiring people and it's not working out and it's a values thing and I haven't been open about that, explicit about that, then that's on me. So what are my values? And I had to, doing that work is, because you can get really cliche, can't you? It's like, well, authenticity and honesty and trust. And actually, for me, I was like, well, growth mindset is a huge value that I have. We call it internally, we call it Kaizen or Kaizenity. And it's that kind of mindset of like, are you continuously wanting to work on yourself and improve yourself? And if you're not, then flow's probably not the right place for you. So that was something that we were able to go. That's why some people are not going to work here. Another one we found was clarity. So are you willing to, if you're not clear on something, it's on you to get clear and try and ask the questions so that it becomes, if it's not clear for you, it's probably not clear for someone else. So can you be clear? Can you find the things that are not clear, whether it's like the holiday policy or whether it's like what we're working on right now? And then how can we try and bring that as well from a leadership point of view, so we're being as clear as we can with people and everybody's got that sense of knowing what's what. So and then the other one was humility. Just like, are you willing to be wrong? Are you willing to say, like, I could be wrong here? It doesn't mean that you're not confident, that you're not bold, but are you willing to say, look, yeah, this could be something that I haven't considered, or some character trait that's causing me to get annoyed about this situation that maybe I have to rethink. Just again, that growth mindset. So those were the three, and then we found we kind of tried to stick to three because we wanted everybody to be able to remember them. Before I think we had 7 or 8, and it was just nobody had a clue. So I'm pretty confident everybody in the organization would know those 3 values. And then we decided to add another one, which was compassion, which is just about, we want to think about people as people. And it's important, not just important that we get to the destination, but that everybody feels like they've been brought along with us and that we're doing the right thing by people as well. And that was something that, actually I didn't bring that. It was the leadership team. We're like, there's something here that these three aren't capturing about what is true for our organization. So it was great to kind of get to the bottom of that. And, I was willing to add another one at the risk of being able to remember them.
Yeah.
Well, you nailed it just now. So it was fine.
Yeah, but we actually ask, as a team, a leadership team, we actually ask each other. Somebody says, "What?" I'll ask one of the team, "What are the values? How do we behave?" Which is one of our key questions. This is the kind of Lencioni model. So we always ask, why do we exist? How do we behave? What do we do? What's most important right now? Every Monday morning. So,
And who are you asking that to? Because that was, the fact that they came and said, actually, there's something missing suggests to me that there's a conversation, or they're very mindful of, what the 3 are, and then to identify something that's missing. So what is it that was my question was going to be, what were you doing? So that you're kind of answering that.
Well, yeah, so we just got a framework for the meetings that start with, check in, how are you doing? How's your weekend? And then, right, let's go through the 4 key questions and get into it. And then we look at, and so it's kind of, it always comes up from that. And if something goes wrong, it's kind of like, well, where is there a problem with the values? If somebody's like, if there's an issue with somebody or somebody's not happy, it's like, where are they on the values? So when we do like reviews, it would generally be a case to go, how is this person on, are they living up to these values, or are they above the line or below the line on those? It's a good opportunity for feedback, and it's a great opportunity to cross-check when you're hiring as well. So it's definitely something where, like, this is not just an exercise. It's for external purposes. It's for our internal system, that we know that we're staying consistent with who we are.
You said that earlier on that you were initially reluctant to do anything around values, and now you sound very, very kind of proficient at using them to good effect.
Yeah, it's so, when you get your values, it's so freeing in a way to have that conversation with people, because it's really clear. These are the values. This is where somebody's struggling. It's a humility issue, or it's a growth mindset issue. And so, what's the value that's missing here? And if it's something else, then maybe there's a value that we haven't identified. So I think, like, so far, like, those are really the ones, but we're always scanning to sort of go, maybe there's something else here, like maybe. But generally, if it doesn't work out with a member of the team, it's going to be one of those values that we should have. Like, it should be a values thing. Yeah. The only other thing would be is performance. So it's values or performance. Yeah. And I think once you've got that, it just becomes a lot easier to manage a team.
Yeah. So what have the last few years looked like for you? COVID's an interesting one. You raised money around about that time as well, I think. So, give us a wee snapshot of
Yeah, I think it's almost been probably the biggest change for us. Obviously going remote, going from being in the office every day to being remote. We're still pretty remote. Like we're in the office maybe one day a week at the moment. So that's been a big change. We also just decided, like, we noticed our revenue wasn't growing at the rate we needed it to grow. We'd raised money and we'd hired to hit that plan, and we had to scale back, so we'd gone on this kind of big adventure of scaling all the way up from, I think, 15 people to 33 people, an office in Australia, and having to then go, right, that's a pretty big payroll. Our revenue is going to have to be at this level. Like every time we've raised money in the past, we've always tried to get our revenue back to the point where we're break even. So we've got the freedom to bring in the right investors and not take money that we don't want to take from investors that we don't want to take it from. So we don't want to be in that kind of staying alive mode. So previously, we've always done that. We raised 100K. We got our revenues back to that level. We raised 200. We raised 500. And then we did 1.5 million, and we got our revenue to that, but our spend was like way beyond that. So we had to make the difficult decision to cut back the team, probably about September 21, to get our revenue, like our spend, under control, because we didn't want to have to be forced into a raising a round of money in a kind of distress mode. And it's funny because we were just slightly off kilter with all the other things. So we didn't furlough anybody whenever that was coming in, because we were on the upwards at that point. And then we did the redundancies, and then since then all these other tech companies have been making redundancies and scaling back, and we kind of almost felt like we got that pain out of the way sooner. So it was actually really good. Although probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do as a business is to like take a team that's just really tight and the culture's in a brilliant place, and then almost feels like a death. Yeah. Like it's like it hasn't worked. We're going to have to start again and move back into that experimentation startup mindset of like, let's figure it out.
Yeah. This is maybe quite a personal question, but do you remember that point? Was it you lying one and you're like, we have just got to do this?
Yeah, it was. I do actually. My COO was sort of we were looking at the cash flow, and she was saying, like, how do you feel about this? And I was like, let's get to Christmas and see if we haven't cracked it by then, because there's a lot of stuff I was saying we were doing. It was slow experimentation at the time, but it felt like we were trying a load of stuff. We're trying some content. We're trying ads. We're and like it feels like something's going to work, something's going to happen, and you have that kind of belief, like you say. It's like you're driving your car and you're going to get to that next thing. And yeah, I think we had a board meeting and the board said, look, we think you should do it now. Like, don't. And I was like, okay, and I think they were right. It was right to do it at that time, because it wouldn't have made any difference if we'd waited until after Christmas. Christmas is always a difficult time to do it. So it probably felt like, all the people that we let go managed to get jobs really quickly. We were able to help them, connect them up, really try hard. And some of them have gone on to do great things. It's been really, it's the way things work. And at the time it feels tough, but actually, they're all really employable if you've done a good job. So yeah, it was tough, but the moment became quite clear, and then it just becomes, right, we've got to work to that. And it's difficult because you know it before everybody else knows it, and this is going to be a really hard thing coming, and you've got to get legal advice, you've got to do it right. It's not fun, and it's not the way I would like to do it, but there's a certain way it has to go.
And how did that feel as well? From almost you're on the scale up journey, and then it's like, okay, that bit hasn't worked. We have to kind of rein it back. Almost I'm going to say ego. There's other people watching you as well. I mean, how do you manage that from a messaging to the people that, well, I guess investors, but even just for yourself? And okay, how do you then reset the?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's so much going on. You know, you're when you're in it, I think you're not thinking about that. But then I think afterwards, it does feel like, oh, we failed. You know, we haven't done the job that we wanted to do. And I think again, sometimes you just need that reset to go. If I reframe this as like, we're a company, we've got this amount of revenue coming in annually, like, you know, if I was to be able to say, you know, it's like equivalent of raising $1.5 million a year from an investor, but you're raising it from your customers, like a lot of people would bite your hand off for that. So I think it's kind of realizing like, okay, well, if we were to imagine we're starting from scratch, but we've got this revenue from our existing customers, we've got a good product, we've got a great team. So we're in a really strong position to go again. And if we can find the mental energy and the passion to do that, then like, let's go. So it's just realizing that, yeah, like it's almost sometimes easier when you're starting from scratch because nobody's expecting anything. When you're in that pre-revenue stage, it's all about the excitement and you're building that narrative. All of a sudden now you've got this different narrative. You're 10 years in, your revenue's not growing in the way you want it to grow. So your kind of main metrics don't look as good. But you still believe there's something out there. And I think it's always that balance of like having the faith that this is going to work. And it's just like, yeah, can we push through the dip or do we quit? And so I think in my head, I was actually like, imagine I'm going to buy this company back off somebody else, come in, figure out what's wrong and fix it. And that's kind of the mentality we've taken. And, you know, we've got a very, very clear strategy of what we're trying to do. And, you know, in some ways, I've learned more in the last 18 months than I've ever learned. Yeah. So I just feel really excited about what we're doing and it feels like we're getting really close.
And does it feel then like, you know, you talked about the mental energy, having that as everyone in the business reset in that way and are now plowing forward?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think we've worked really hard. You know, I think COVID's just played such a, you know, difficult for so many people. You know, one of the things we realized was actually like, okay, we work in the interim after that, like that year after that, so beginning of 2022, people were working so hard and running just for this kind of goal, and actually people were burning out. Yeah. And we thought about it really seriously, and we actually decided, we heard about this 9-day fortnight policy of giving every other Friday off. And we thought, well, why don't we try that? You know, because actually it gives people this opportunity to reset, and maybe we're working in a different culture now than the world has changed. Let's give this a try. And so we tried that about almost a year ago now, and we've been running it ever since, and it's fantastic. Just from a point of burnout, people's, you know, mental energy and capacity, it feels like the team is really rejuvenated. And you know, you go in on a Thursday and they're fired up, and there's you know, it's working really well. On the other Friday, we try and encourage people to have as a no meeting day as well. So, you know, even though they're working that Friday, it's kind of like a different pace.
So does the whole company take that Friday off?
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah. Okay. Apart from one person who covers support. Right. So we always have one person kind of on duty, just to be taught, because we've got customer support coming in. Yeah. But really, everybody else, and that means it's very quiet. So actually today for me, it's a 9-day fortnight Friday. And it's just, you know, it's nice to wake up and take the day a little bit slower and just think about how can I get in the right headspace for, I mean, I still think about the business. I'm still always thinking about it, but it also gives me an opportunity to think, I'm going to cut the grass, I'm going to get a haircut, I'm going to, you know, call one of my friends or arrange to play golf or something that I wouldn't do, you know, on another day. Yeah,
it's an interesting. I hadn't really thought of it as the whole company taking the same day off, because that would be helpful. Unlike, you know, well, it's all rotational and you've still got half the people working one week, and before you know it, you're getting phone calls. Oh, I didn't realize you're off. So that's quite a nice way.
I think that makes a huge difference. Yeah. I was speaking to another company, we're talking about doing it that way of you know, just compressed hours for different people. And I just thought the advantage is, certainly selfishly as a leader, it's like if half your team are working, you're still essentially on duty. You know, people are still going to be slacking you, or Whereas today, I'm not expecting to get any messages from the team.
Today?
And I'm not expecting anybody to be getting messages. So there'll be one person who's dealing with our inbound, and that's it. And it does really just feel like it's something we look forward to. It's slightly different to what I imagine a 4-day week would be like, because every time it comes around, it's like, oh, this is an opportunity to think about something differently, like to do something that I wouldn't normally do. And it always feels a little bit like, a treat when it comes around.
Yeah.
This keeps coming up in our team as like, and every time I'm like, oh, bro. After this, everyone's going to be mentioning it again.
Yeah, you've seen all this.
They're all listening.
Sorry.
But you're not the first person. I think somebody else we had on, I can't remember who it was, but was, said the same thing. And it's just been.
But if you get that energy from your team, over 9 days, and you just rethink it, it's like it's a 9-day, sprint in a way.
Yeah.
And then, you've got a bit more time. I think the world we live in is just like, especially we've got kids, and the weekends are just taken up with like football drops and all sorts of things, and it can feel like you're coming back in on Monday with that dread, because you didn't get all the things done, you don't feel like you've reset. And actually, I feel like the Monday afterwards, people are always really ready to go, and that's what you want. You need that kind of energy. So I don't feel like we're missing something. I feel like we're gaining something as a team because of it. There's a real energy.
Here's a question for you then. How good are you at taking holidays?
I'm getting like a lot better. Like I was saying, I've got to the point now where I feel like I've worked really hard to outsource as much as I can. I've got like an EA now that helps me with a lot of stuff. I'm business and personal. I've got a COO who is fantastic, who basically runs the company. That's again another book, Rocket Fuel, which talks about the visionary and the integrator. Yeah. She's definitely the integrator. So I feel like I don't need to be there as much. I don't need to have my mental energy on it. So I can take a holiday, in that way. And I suppose the challenge is to me is to be thinking like, how much of this holiday am I listening to podcasts, trying to read books, thinking about the business strategically, and how much am I just thinking like, I'm going to play the piano, I'm going to go surfing, I'm going to do something to relax and not think about it. So I'm probably pretty bad at that still. Yeah. I'm always consuming content, and maybe that's not a good thing all the time. So there's probably still work to do. But I think from a rest point of view, I'm not interfering. I'm not going in and checking stuff in the same way. I'm getting involved just to feel busy. That's a big shift for me. That's a big change.
Amazing. This has been really cool to hear your story. We ask every guest who comes on, what is your guiding principle in business?
Guiding principle is probably that there's less we can control than we think. That's pretty a life principle, but I think in business, so it's kind of like, let's give it our best shot. And you just never know what's going to happen. It's real. Like all the things that have happened for us, you just think there's so many things where we couldn't have predicted that. And so show up, stay curious, and treat people well. Like that's something we've always tried to do, like treat people essentially the way you'd like to be treated. And I think hopefully that people who, if you ask anybody who's been in the float team, they would say that they get that fair treatment.
And I think you said a phrase earlier, which I wrote down, which I can't find my page now, which was open the box. That seems to be, I wondered if that was something there. That seems to be a thing that's with you.
There's definitely been some times where we've just, certainly with Jen and I, where like, do we do this? Should we take this opportunity? And sometimes, she's playing the sort of responsible card, and I'm maybe pushing a bit, and it actually, we find a balance there. But the times we've taken the risks, I think you know, like it's not always going to work out, but you know, I think you have to take your chances sometimes.
Yeah. Well done.
Amazing. Thanks so much for sharing your story, and good luck in the
Really
future.
good to be here.